All right. So, part two. This is a very complicated and nuanced thing, and I wouldn't be surprised if I lose followers because of it. Every time I talk about something that's nuanced, I see a couple followers disappear, but it's still going up. So, I hope uh I'm cultivating a more intelligent and reasonable audience. And maybe eventually the ones who have lost their way will come back to the light at some point. Now, I want to again say and state unequivocally that I am absolutely 100% in support of the First Amendment. As a matter of fact, I'm practicing it now. And the right to a free press is one of the most important aspects of the First Amendment. In fact, I believe that's the primary reason why Great Britain is so fucked up right now, is because they don't actually have the right to a free press. So even more independent British news media like The Guardian, they spend a lot of their time reporting on all the crazy things happening here in America because they're not really allowed to report on all the crazy things happening in the UK. There's a couple English individuals that will crash out on me over the fact that we have some crazy things going on in here right now. I'm like, bro, you have little girls that are defending their sisters from pedophiles with hatchets because the police aren't doing anything. And then the police arrest the little girl for defending her little sister from a pedophile. Like, we don't need that type of chaos here in the United States. Please, if you are from the UK, stop telling us how to fix our problems because your problems are way worse right now. All right, give me a moment. Apparently, I'm already running out of space. I don't know how because I deleted the previous videos. Actually, I think it occurred to me because it's saving the video to a different spot and it doesn't just show up in my camera roll when I edit it. So I'm gonna have to go and fix that in a moment. We're gonna run out of space because this phone is a pain in the ass, but I'll fix it in the coming months, hopefully. Now, the important thing here is you can't commit crimes doing journalism, right? And to some extent, I would I'd say there's a little bit of a gray area, right? Especially when it comes to certain kinds of recording laws, right? Some I would argue are absolutely restrictions on speech. I personally don't necessarily vibe with the idea of single consent record or dual consent recording states. What that means is there are certain laws in the United States where it depends on state. Either you live in a single consent or a dual consent state, which means to record a phone call or a conversation, both parties of the conversation need to provide consent. That's why you hear whenever you call some kind of corporation, you hear a very thing where it's like, oh, this may be recorded, right? They're using like a loophole to record you without giving their consent for you to record them, which is pretty fucked up. And I think if one side is allowed to record, both sides should be able to record, right? And it's there are certain restrictions on journalism that I would argue are either overreaching or arguably worth committing the crime for. Now, if you want to argue that reporting on the actions of the people who disrupted the church were worth committing the crime for, that's fine. But I would say don't make a soapbox out of this then. Just respect him for having the balls to go and commit a crime in the pursuit of journalism, right? Because I think overall, it's probably a good thing that he reported on that because the whole world wouldn't know about the kind of bullshit that was going on if he did, right? Apparently, that group of people have been doing this for quite some time. And I think he thought he was hoisting some kind of revolutionary flag or something. But in reality, he actually exposed an evil that's been happening, right? There's an old saying, treat other people as you wish to be treated. So that's why I find it so ironic that I don't want to make this about race, but they've already made it about race. So it is about race, right? Um, that's why I find it so ironic that these black people are complaining about being charged with a crime that was designed to prevent the Ku Klux Klan from interfering with black people when they have so little self-awareness that they don't realize the irony of it. They've become the very thing they hate, right? And there's two really big important aspects of it, right? The first thing is they just didn't even need to target a church in the first place. There's only two things that that particular act that they got charged with protects. That is churches and abortion clinics, because those are often targets of political activists, we'll call them. I don't Activism has a point though, and I believe is generally positive in nature, whereas what these people are doing seems just like pointless baby rage and has no positive effect. All it does, in fact, is negatively hurt the movement, because while the people on the extreme left are going to support that, everyone else is going to see it as a disgusting abuse and violation of people's First Amendment rights. The great irony is that the left is trying to claim that this is a violation of their First Amendment rights without acknowledging the fact that the whole reason they're in trouble is for violating other people's First Amendment rights. There's another old saying, which is your rights end where someone else's rights begin. Yes, I am fully in support of the right to free speech, the right to a free press, but I'm also fully in support of the separation of church and state and the right to practice your religion. These people intentionally went in and just to be clear, not all of them, nor all of the ones charged with crimes were black, which is why it's so insane that they're trying to make it a race thing, because it's not really a race thing. It's just these people went out and committed a crime. Some of them were white and some of them are black. But because some of them were black and they're being held accountable for committing a crime, people are trying to paint it as a race thing, even though one of the main guys charged was white and looks a lot like me, actually, except I think he has a little more hair on the top and less on the bottom. So here's the thing. This is really exhausting for me. I don't want to talk about any of this. I'd rather just talk about how much fun I have with Marvel Rivals or Warframe, or how excited I am to review the new Poppy album when I finally get around to it. But I feel like I have an obligation to not be silent. You know, I'm watching America collapse as we speak. I am very certain that America is the harlot spoken of in the Bible. And I really hope we don't see Judgment Day uh, on while I'm still on this planet. But this is the type of behavior that brings it ever closer, right? I don't believe that the timeline is set in stone. It's like a chemical reaction. Most people think chemical reactions that don't really know much about science or stoichiometry, which is the science and math of calculating chemical reactions. It was like my least favorite thing of chemistry. But most people think chemical reactions just kind of happen at a constant, but there are so many variables to the speed of a chemical reaction. Temperature, surface area, how much total mass of the chemical you have, all kinds of things, right? I do believe that the fall of the harlot is inevitable, but this is how you speed it up, right? Ask yourself truly, what kind of society, what kind of world do you want to live in? What kind of world do you want your children to live in? Do you want to live in a peaceful, civilized world, or a world that is post-apocalyptic and ravaged by war? Now, unfortunately, there are too many people that would choose the second because they have some kind of like either God complex, or they just hate themselves that much that they don't care if they die. The ones with the God complex assume they'll be the ones to survive. But the reality of it is, if 90% of the world's population is wiped out, there's a 90% chance you're one of the ones that die. And if you do survive, probably everyone that you know and care about dies, right? So that doesn't seem like a future I want. And it's insane that it's definitely not a future I want. Let's be clear with that. It's insane that there are so many people that is a future they want. It's just utterly mind-boggling to me that so many people would choose death and destruction over peace. And I hate all this kind of accelerationism. To be honest, I don't even know if Hassan is really on the left, because as Destiny has pointed out so many times, he does more damage to the Democratic Party than he does to help them. And there's many times where he is rallying against the Democratic Party. Part of me wonders if he's just a Russian propaganda. Oh no, it's a Chinese propaganda bot apparently, right? Uh, but I don't know if that's actually true. There is a very small possibility, but I think the reality is more that he's just an accelerationist. Um, if you don't know what accelerationism is, just Google it. It's a bad thing as far as I'm concerned, um, because it's only going to lead to the inevitable collapse of the United States. And I love this country very much. I don't want to see it die. So it's important that we don't make excuses for criminals just because they're on our side, you know? I think this hypocrisy is what's really driving the divide, you know? The right wants to make excuses for ICE officials that are murdering people in the streets now because, oh, he was a violent protester. Yes, that's true, but at no point did his violence ever escalate to a point where it deserved lethal force. And if we really want to focus on the specifics of that, the ICE officers were assaulting protesters before he turned violent, right? Now, we can get into the specifics of, well, do you have a right to resist law enforcement when they're breaking the law? The answer is, uh, well, a right, I would argue yes. But legally, it depends on the state. Some states allow you to resist law enforcement officers that are breaking the law, others don't. So the important thing is we can't be making excuses for people that are committing immoral acts. I'm going to move beyond simple legality here, right? Because the the unfortunate thing about law in the United States is there are lawyers on both sides of it that will argue either side regardless of what the law actually says. So it's it's actually insane to me that so many people keep supporting immoral acts simply because they were done against people they don't like. And that's why it keeps happening on both sides, right? We're stuck in a revolving door of a tu brute, right? Or that's not even a correct. Forget I said that. I don't know why I said that. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm just randomly spitting out classical terms. Uh, what am I saying? What I'm saying, let me refocus real quick. We're stuck in a cycle of eye for an eye. And that is not a good place to be. Don't get me wrong. I am wholeheartedly in support of order and justice. But vengeance is not justice, right? That is the very opposite of it. So instead of pursuing justice, we have devolved into an unending cycle of vengeance and violence. And here's the thing, you will always find an excuse for vengeance or violence. Even the people we love hurt us accidentally sometimes. And now the United States is devolving into a state where people are hurting each other intentionally just because they don't like each other. Why is Don Lemon a criminal? I don't think I've mentioned that part yet, and I want to be very specific about it. I think I mentioned it in the first part, but specifically, he had foreknowledge that a crime was being committed, attempted to conceal that crime, and then participated in it anyways. There is video evidence of it because he recorded it himself, right? Or his people recorded it. There are many specific areas where he actually did truly commit a crime. Now, whether or not you think that was appropriate, that's up to you. Uh, I would argue that there are times where committing a crime is the morally appropriate thing to do. For instance, hiding Jews during the Holocaust, right? Technically a crime, but I think if I were living in Germany and I had Jewish neighbors that were facing execution, I would absolutely commit a crime in that situation. So just committing a crime doesn't necessarily mean that an act is immoral, but in this situation I believe it actually was, right? They went out of their way to violate American citizens' right to practice their religion. He knew this was happening because he even specifically says they're going to a church beforehand, and he participated in it anyways. Now, I do think there is a right to free speech and a right to a free press. And if you ask me, his big mistake was live streaming the whole thing for two reasons. One, from a legal standpoint, all of that is out there to be used against him in court to show every specific instance where he actually committed a crime. And if you want a breakdown of that, go talk to an actual lawyer. There is a great video by Legal Mindset on YouTube that talks about all the crimes that Don Lemon actually committed. Well, not all of them, but it does some of them. And I highly recommend you check that out. Also, another guy, Nate the lawyer, talks about the crimes that are committed. There are other lawyers, lawyers on the left that are arguing against it. I haven't seen the whole video yet, but there is a Legal Eagle video that is claiming this is a violation of the First Amendment. And I guess they're right in that the churchgoers' First Amendment rights were violated. But this is why I don't really like or trust lawyers, because they pretend that they're just trying to follow the law. But the truth is, what they're really trying to do is bend the law to their own personal beliefs. There have been times where I've seen Nate the lawyer, who's right-leaning, do the same thing just in the opposite direction as Legal Eagle. As far as I can tell, Legal Mindset seems to be more of a center individual who approaches the law from a law standpoint and less from a political tilt than either Nate or Devin, who's the Legal Eagle guy. But what it boils down to is these people violated a law that was designed to protect religious freedoms, and now they're crying crocodile tears. And I'm so sick of that. Can we just please start holding criminals accountable for their crimes, regardless of which political side they're on? I do not like to see the weaponization of law as a political tool, because that is how we end up with authoritarianism. That is how we end up with tyrants. And I don't want to live in a tyrannical authoritarian state. And I really hope you don't either. All right, I am out of space. So I just want to say, make sure you're armed and training. Delete Windows, de-Google yourself. I love all of you, and God bless America. Cheers. We'll talk about this more later.